I am V K Dadhwal. I started my journey in space from Space Application Center in 1983. So I was born and brought up in Delhi. Uh, then I did a BSc in botany. That was 1973 to 76. Then I joined Indian Agriculture Research Institute and did a master's in plant physiology. And then 1978, I joined the PhD at IIRI. And after some discussions and the type of guides available, I decided to do a PhD on growth modeling of wheat, especially the impact of temperature, photoperiod, and radiation. I will bring this, then, that created my career later. So sometime 1982 and 1983 early, I will have to recall, a team came to IRI. It was a campus recruitment. And then we were told that you can appear. I was in PhD 5th year. So that is the first time I heard about satellite and tried in an interview. I am told those interviews were scrapped because the issue raised in those days was that why should ISRO go to only one institute, not two legally. Anyway, so maybe January, February of 1983, there was an advertisement. So I traveled to Ahmedabad and then appeared for the interview and went back. So sometime in April and or May, I was offered a position. So I quickly submitted my thesis. Anyway, it was long overdue, 5 years, and landed in Ahmedabad on 12th June 1983. But couldn't join. This is very interesting, because for you to join, you should have a medical certificate. I had done my medical at Maulana Azad, but they took almost 20 days to send the certificate. So I could join SAC only on 30th June 1983. So the moment I landed and joined, our boss was Dr. Baldev Sahai. And the division was called, long name, Aerial Surveys, Ground Truth and Photo Interpretation Division, AGPD. So so first thing I was asked is, can you forecast groundnut production? So I started learning about satellites. At those days, there was no digital image processing. So how you can have the FCC and DISO print, and can you visually identify groundnut? And then what happened? ISRO was into IRS utilization program. So the IRS utilization program, sometime in September of 1983, an office order came where I was member of a team called Crop Production Forecasting. The PI was J.S. Parihar, who was an agronomist who had joined SAC in 1974. There was Mr. Kalu Barme, another agronomist, one astrophysicist from PRL, Dr. M.B. Poddar, and myself. But I was already, familiar with these crop, production, forecasting, yield modeling. So the first thing we decided was, we were, trying to get influenced that let us go to Surat and Navsari and do wheat forecasting. We said, if you want to do wheat forecasting, we'll go to Haryana, Punjab and do it. So in December 1983, myself, Parihar and Kalu Barme took an open jeep, traveled 2.5 days and started doing field work for wheat identification. So we actually used Landsat MSS data and digital classification to produce, sometime in 1984, the first map of wheat crop in Karnal. That actually picture appears in the DOS annual report also. But I am told when the SAC went to Professor U.R. Rao, he told, what is this one district, one crop? You have to do whole state. So then the IRS UP CPF became a project LACA, large area crop acreage. And then since we didn't have that type of digital facilities, I had to devise a statistical scheme, segment based, which was also used by NASA for their global wheat forecasting. And then we did the first whole Haryana state by next year. When again the team, the SAC management team went to Chairman Professor U.R. Rao, he said, what is one crop? You should do whole India and all crops. This is how, Professor U.R. Rao used to work. And whatever you do, you get the pressure back to do 10 times more. So from 1983, we went on. Since those days, computer facilities were not there. So I used to spend almost 1 month each after Rabi and Kharif in one of the RRSCs. Regional Remote Sensing Service Centers were set up in 1986, and they got one Numelex system from Belgium. Each one had the computer processing. So for large area processing, we would carry big tapes, land up at Delhi, take a bus to Dehradun, and at every place octroi will stop us. That why are you carrying computer things? Where is the bill? Anyway, so we learned and we made long time friendship with the RRSC people. It went on. I also then started work for WRIS in Puri and Cuttack. But then we had to expand teams. And finally, this CPF team almost had 20 collaborators, about 25 people in SAC, a total team of about 140-50. And the project was funded to the tune of almost 2.5 crore per year by the Ministry of Agriculture. It was a very, very, I would say, strenuous work to ask for money, defend it, do field work, go outside SAC, do the image processing, and still produce the result within 1 month of the harvest. So there are many stories around that. One of the stories is that we were in Pipli block, and there we were doing field work, and it is rice. So when the jeep is trying to turn, it got stuck in the rice. And you can understand, up to your knee level, you have water there, and your jeep is stuck, and you have to out. Another interesting thing was we were returning in night on GT road. Those were the days of terrorism, and there was shooting on the GT road. It went on like this till we were, larger team, and I was helping out in lot of such activity. Then the ISRO wanted to do quantitative and wanted to do modeling for irrigation. So then we took up a project on, water estimation, performance evaluation of irrigation amount. So the two projects which I took were the Mahi Right Bank Canal, and the second one was the Indira Gandhi Nahar Pariyojana. Doing field work for Indira Gandhi Nahar Pariyojana in May and January. January, it is so biting cold in Hanumangarh that you really have pain in your knees. And in May, if you were in Suratgarh and Hanumangarh, there is so much sand that every 10 minutes you stop and you have to drink water. You can't see more than 20 meters. But that was very interesting. And the other part was we tried to use a software ISRO GIS which was getting developed. So by this time, I knew a lot of crop identification, crop modeling. So the first thing was inducted was into a ground segment committee for IRS 1C. So there the ISAC teams, NRSC teams, and the payload and data software team would day in, day out argue. Mr. Shiv Kumar was the chairman, who later on became the director of ISRO Satellite Center. He was before that he also was the director ISTRAC. And then two things which I distinctly recall is the first two IRS did not have the SWIR band. And then I did studies to indicate if you want to separate mustard from other crop and groundnut from other kharif crop, without SWIR band you can't do it. So this experiment was done. We brought out results, and then Dr. Navalgund, etc. We prepared a big report. Then I think they went to Professor U.R. Rao. First we had to convince Dr. George Joseph and Shri Kiran Kumar. Dr. George Joseph was head of sensor development division, and Kiran Kumar was the in charge for designing these IRS cameras. So the issue was, for bringing one sensor, they had to drop a band, and the blue got dropped. We were not in favor of it. We thought it is important for atmospheric fluctuation. So those things went on. Then another interesting thing which we could do was, when IRS 1C got launched, I could use multi-date WIFs and do the national wheat for the first time with WIFs data. So what we showed was high temporal data compensating for the spatial resolution, and still you could match the acreage. There are large number of other events which went on. So many interesting stories of field work and the issues you face in field work. And but in 1998, there was a part of reorganization. They created what is called crop modeling division. So I had about 8-9 people. For the first time, we got youngsters who later on did PhD, and still I work with some of them. So we started work on estimating leaf area, estimating crop biomass, and many things which I continue. After the wheat work in 1996, we were debating what to do next. So we produced a proposal called Fasal. It was for multi-crop nationwide. So we had group had long debates. Then finally the Fasal was forecasting agriculture with space agrometeorology and land-based, So we spent half a day in actually finding a good name for the project also. So the Fasal project did not get really funded till quite some time. So ISRO and the routine project went on. Okay, the other part of the development was, while I was doing all this, 1989 I had a award of the Indian National Science Academy Young Scientist Medal. So that permitted me to do some research. So my whole week is for crop forecasting. Saturday and Sunday, I would like to do carbon cycle. Why carbon cycle is very important? There was one Professor S.K. Sinha of IIRI who was our teacher. Later on, he was IIRI director also. He was a professor of plant physiology. So he had attended this Villiers conference of 1980. And he had once told me, as plant physiologist, you should work on if CO2 doubles, what happens to plants. So you must do carbon cycle. So our teacher, so advice. But the good thing was at that time our director was Shri Pramod Kale. So once morning and evening he would call people and discuss many things. So after my award he called me and said what you would do. I said if you would permit me to get some student, I would like to do carbon cycle. So he really sort of went out of his way. And then one Professor A.B. Vora, head of the botany department, and two students started doing PhD. They were not my student. They remained Professor Vora's student, and they did PhD in botany, but on carbon cycle. So then we had Professor B.H. Subbaraya of the PRL, who was the program director for the IGPP. So when he saw what work we are doing, he said I should come to the ISRO Geosphere Biosphere program. So then I started the carbon cycle work. So like this continued. I went on doing couple of things. But one more thing which I want to point out is when 1983 I came and my boss was Dr. Baldev Sahai, he was very particular about what you write. And then he gave me one more job. He said there were 16 projects, 8 were in SAC. So he said, you now produce a monthly progress report. So I have to go to each PI. Nobody will send a progress report. So I have to discuss with them and write. But that I had to learn what to write for water quality, what to write for watershed, what to write for forestry, what to write for even SAC was developing a passive parallel signal image processing system. So I have to go to K.S. Dasgupta, who incidentally was my predecessor at IIST as director. So I'd go to K.S. Dasgupta and get his monthly progress report. So the learning opportunities were very large. And then this SAC culture of having committee work. So I could learn many things about, satellite technology, sensor, image processing, you name. It was totally beyond, my any training. The other part was because of our crop image processing, I was a member of the standing committee of software evaluation for RRSC. So all software developed by RRSC had to go through T&D. And then I would sit there and work. So I was trying to do from a botany, no image processing, formal education, doing lot of crop classification, using IMSL to write our classification code, and sitting in the software evaluation. So much so that when the Punjab Remote Sensing Center was set up, they didn't have staff. So when the Wipro supplied them image processing system, I was sent from SAC to go there, and for 4 days we actually did the T&D and the acceptance test for the image processing. So I was fortunate that I could really do very large. Other very important culture of ISRO was, in that era, we as scientists, SC, we actually had the chance to make presentation to Chairman ISRO. So when Professor U.R. Rao came to SAC in our Vikram Hall, I made a presentation on CPF. Then in between we had to make a presentation when there was a transition from Professor U.R. Rao to Dr. Rangan. And Dr. Rangan would not agree that with NOAA and the amount of satellite, you don't get data for RIS classification. So for 1 year, every day NOAA picture, we took printout and put India grid, square grid, and marked fraction cloudy, and then visited Bangalore on a Saturday and convinced him that without SAR, you would not be able to do. His argument was very simple. You see, for drought assessment, you composite all the NOAA images, some pixels will be there, and then you can classify. So we explained to him difference between vegetation index and identifying rice from other crops, discrimination, which doesn't work with, mixture of the signature. So very interesting. The other at that time, I wanted to do more carbon cycle also. I'll come to it. Then, sometime in 2004, April, Dr. Naval Gund, who had left the SAC to become director NRSC, NRSA, he called me, "Would you go to Dehradun?" I said, "Why?" He says, "No, no, the uh, dean of Dehradun is shifting. So, because you like academic work, I think you should go to." I said, "Sir, if you think I am suitable and this would be my temperament, I will go." So, within 1 week, there was a office order that I was the dean of the IIRS. So, I went from SAC. So, I left all the crop work. I had two almirahs of reprints, books, and so many papers. I said to all friends, "Here is, you take all of that. I am now going out." So I went to Dehradun. So Dehradun was very interesting. We actually defended the international collaboration with ITC and extended the international master's program in geo-hazards and geo-informatics. So I did a couple of visits to Netherlands ITC also. Plus, I wanted to ensure that the students do more quantitative. So at IIRS, we established 5 field observatories. One for runoff in Sitlarao watershed. Then one we did for measuring runoff near Roorkee. Then one we did for soil moisture in a forest. And then there was a project which I had been trying for 7, 8 years to set up flux towers. In fact, I spent 12, 14 years pleading, requesting money for flux towers. But then we did establish flux towers in Barkot, that is a Sal, in Haldwani, with collaboration with Italians. That was a closed path in plantation. Then this march goes on. We also had a lot of projects. For the first time, because of the IGBP, we had, with my colleagues of IIRS, we identified something like 45 PIs, and we did the entire forest biomass field sampling, 6,500 points. That is the only national biomass measurement independent of Forest Department and the Forest Survey of India. Okay. I also had the opportunity to be in the Technical Advisory Committee of FSI, work on India's national communication to UNFCCC. We produced the first soil carbon assessment of forest based on our maps and the surveys. We could also establish in teak flux tower, and then I had to move to NRSC. NRSC at that time, for a year I was associate director. Dr. Jaraman was director. Then he moved out. I became the director. So at NRSC, I think we were able to do very, very significant things. First, we operationalized the IMGEOS. So we really had a capacity to do almost like 500 plus scenes on that day itself we could process and give. We also were in the process, it was initiated in Dr. Jaraman's time, a ground station at Antarctica. So we really went ahead, motivated teams who had to stay 8 to 10 months in Antarctica, and we established ground station in Antarctica. Bhuvan till that time was only for just putting images of list 4. But then I realized the way the map and Bhuvan are, Google are progressing, and we don't have a high resolution map. So first thing what we did was we started producing 1 degree grid of list 3, which were freely downloadable. So we created a section called Noida NRSC Open EO Data Archive, for which we had to go through many cycles of approval from chairman, etc. Later on, we added the Cartosat DEM also for free download. Then the maps which NRSC was doing as part of NR census, we said that they must be all put for as a WMS service. So by the time I left, there were about 2,600 image layers which were being visualized on BHUVAN. So and then we inherited BHUVAN, which was commercial software based. We totally made it open source. That was another big effort. In between, we had IIRS, RISAT launch. So operationalizing radar data from NRSC was another big enterprise. So I found my 5 years at NRSC so much invigorating, so many things to learn. Another very interesting thing, I think one incident which I should tell you is, I was to join as director. I had signed on the previous day. I think it was March when Jaraman, or was it April? So the next day I was to join and come as director NRSA to the office. And then the Arunachal chief minister's helicopter crashed. So I started getting phone call in the car itself from Delhi, from NDMA, from IG Arunachal, from chairman's office. Everybody wants NRSC to find a helicopter. ISRO doesn't have satellite data to really do that. So I didn't go to office. We had a disaster DMS program. So I went to their control room, got our aircraft person who got the 3 Air Force pilots and tried to find out, what is this helicopter business and how do they really fly. We had RISAT 1B. So all images, all possible imaging. So 3 days, literally morning to evening, we searched. Then I could, summarize my experience. We are looking for a metallic ball of shape we don't know. We don't have a prior image to differentiate the difference between non-fallen, baseline and with drop of the helicopter. And this helicopter is not on a bare soil or bare sand. It is in a sloping land in deep forest in Arunachal. And you have X-band SAR, which doesn't penetrate. So we spend a lot of time in, educating people. Then in this 4-5 years, we did a lot of work on flood mapping. We in fact had another big event was this Kedarnath. The Kedarnath, disaster, we really did much better. We did hydrological modeling. We did satellite data. In fact, the list 4 data was used globally to talk of what happened on the first rain, the first landslide and the second landslide and the Chorabari. So like this, there are a number of examples. Then when we had the Hudhud, we could even fly. By that time, NRSC had permission from ARC. Without prior approval, we could fly our aircraft. So we covered the wind-blown, the factories, etc. And every evening, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu was the chief minister. We would go and report today's satellite picture and what analysis of damage. Then we could also set up, Along with that, people could report broken bridge, house or something, and it will come with a geotag picture and sit there. So we could quickly build up, like a base. Why we could do it? Because, as an example, after the our experience of Kedarnath, for DST, we did a project on Manu, which is mapping these disaster areas using 100 students of Srinagar University. Each damage point was brought into the Bhuvan. So I would say NRSC was, every day was a disaster, either for us or in the country. And then we had a big problem. People want satellite data, high resolution, Cartosat. But Cartosat actually covered only 7% of the country in 8 years, cloud free. So with no data, then Director NRSC had to take the decision. Our Cartosat 1 was a unique satellite where you could do yaw rotation of 90 degree. So what you would do is, you can get a 60 kilometer swath of 2.5 meter resolution. So for 1 year, we operated Cartosat 1 with yaw rotation over India to really produce a baseline high resolution picture, which we used to fuse and then try to market, because we really had huge data deficiency. It was so much so that when another issue came was, when I was given this charge, the CAG had already reviewed NRSA 2004, 5, 6, 7. The report is still available in CAG. It simply says, one, you are launching satellite without user participation, but NRSC does not launch satellite, right? Then it says you are not imaging to the capability of a satellite. We went to explain, India is 2% of the globe. Satellite covers whole globe. If there are no international ground station, you don't have onboard capacity. How can you cover the full capacity? Anyway, CAG doesn't understand, not willing to. So they went on commenting, we went on replying. So they set of internal rate of return. So there are a couple of issues. So, but the sum and substance of it was, we would send replies, then at headquarter, with their wisdom, they will sort of tone down our response and it will go. So finally, myself and a chairman, Dr. Radhakrishnan, we had to appear as witness before the parliamentary committee. And there they gave us, some do's and don'ts, and why you are not efficient. So that was the another. The other part was that we also had this program, other national programs which were coming up, and the Prime Minister wanted to do, Shri Modi wanted to do this for large area. So NRSC actually signed almost 30, 40 MOUs. We produced a map of the gale monitoring with the pipeline monitoring at monthly basis. We did a project on linking the mine actual boundary vis-a-vis where it is happening. We did a program with the Ministry of Culture on trying to map all the areas around the restricted monument, whether something new has come up. It was across the board. So I would say this opportunity. Parallelly, what happened was, I was the India's representative to UN Corpus, I think 2012 or 11. By 12, I think I was the leader of the team. So we would go there, make the presentations. So I think 2015, it was the next chairmanship of Science and Technology Committee became vacant. So initially there were no applicants. Then our GV Subramaniam, ambassador in Austria and others, they said, let us have India. Then since I was the leader for past 2-3 years, they proposed. By that time, Japan had also proposed from their side chairmanship. So now we have very close relationship with Japan on UN Corpus. And they had proposed Chiaki Mukai. She is the first Asian woman astronaut. So then it was decided that India would be the chair in ST for the first year, and Chiaki Mukai will take over. So that's why in 2016, the SNT thing I chaired. Since this also gave us an opportunity, so I had the opportunity to hand over the model of MOMS to UN Corpus to the director in February of 2015. So I would say ISRO gave so many tremendous opportunities, which I don't think any other career or for a botany person to really come up. There are a large number of such events. India's participation in IEF. In fact, in the APR SAF, I used to chair a subgroup on technology, of that. In fact, in one of the leaders conference, ISRO didn't go. So I have a picture with some 11 countries chairman of space program, including JAXA chief, standing with holding hands like this to decide to work together. So finally, sometime I think in 2016, I got a message that chairman is suggesting that the opening is coming up for IIST. I should apply for that director. So I appeared in the interview. So Shri Govardhan Mehta, director, long-time director of IISC, he was chairing. So finally, I went July 2016. And IIST has another issue. We were to build a campus in 18 months. It went into a spin and only 2 buildings were there. So I spent most of the time requesting for money, completing the building, which in 2019 we could do 2 blocks, which Shri Kiran Kumar could inaugurate. Plus I could help, or I could persuade my colleagues to really do things. They were doing activity on small satellite. So first we could, in almost like 2 months, we could do the IRIS payload with the physics people, which measured the electrons. And then I think last month, our InspireSat, which I had the privilege of signing the MOU with the Colorado, that also is now flying. We also established a ground station. First UHF, VHF, and then we upgraded to S-band. We also persuaded our chemistry people to really start doing biology. So IIST has a project on measuring the kidney stones of Drosophila in microgravity environment. So my experience at Trivandrum was very mix of building infrastructure, student and admission issues, COVID, managing huge thing, plus ensuring that we did some of the very good things. We set up a small spacecraft payload center. We set up a lab. We set up this microgravity thing. We set up nano sensor, including nano sensors, which will be tested for the CO2 measurement in the human spaceflight capsule. While, of course, I did work on hyperspectral in between. I was the chair of the DST committee on the NISA imaging spectroscopy program. So we used to do that. Uh, so I would say, I mean, for somebody who was doing botany and agriculture, I could do 40 years of continuous learning, amazing people, the type of opportunities. Starting, the first one was when I was sent to Japan in Kumamoto in 2016 as a ISRO representative for inauguration of the Tokai Space Center. To the end, up to the chairmanship of S&T committee of UN Corpus. I mean, I could cover almost so many things, including I chaired a session of the US India's space civil space corporation, the fifth. So I was the Indian co-chair. Went to Washington as part of the second meeting. While we were developing the UN Center, for which I was twice the acting director, in 2013, I was a member of a UN expert group which went to Bihang University to approve setting up of the Regional Remote Sensing Center under UN at Bihang. So amazing experience, lot of uh, amazing people, but I continue to learn, and we could establish flux towers, crop forecasting. Currently, of course, I am chairing an expert group on Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, how to bring technology for farmer insurance. So I think learning never stops. Thank you very much.